Welcome to the History Slam podcast from ActiveHistory.ca. Here is your host, Sean Graham.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to the History Slam, everybody. Coming at you today, we're nearly live in Ottawa, Ontario, where the leaves have changed colors. And with that, people have started to think about Halloween in a couple weeks. And one way in which people across the country start to commemorate Halloween is dealing with ghosts and spooky stories. And in Ottawa, there's a unique experience, tourist experience, of the haunted walks. And we thought, with Halloween coming up, it'd be interesting to talk about the construction of the haunted walks and the history and the paranormal. And to do that, we have with us from Haunted Walks Ottawa, Jim Dean. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Now, I did the tour in the summer, and as I just mentioned to you, I was a little skeptical coming in because I thought it was sort of a, perhaps maybe a sensationalist type of a thing, where you just take people around and almost even make up stories. And I was really intrigued that at the start of the tour, the guide mentioned how much research actually goes into a story before you go on the tour. So I'm curious to know, like, where do the stories come from that you use on your tours?
Yeah, maybe a good place to start, even before getting to that, is just what our perspective is on historical accuracy.
Sure.
And maybe we can think of this in terms of being scared, because we do want to give people a bit of a chill, a bit of a start. You know, that's part of it. We enjoy being scared a little bit. But there are two kind of ways to be scared. One is, you know, like a horror movie when something jumps out at you, a dark, creepy place where something unexpected, dangerous seems to happen. That's one way. But the way we focus on is when you stop and think about it. It's more of an intellectual scare, if you will. You know, taking the sensationalism out and just concentrating on the facts as accurately depicted as possible, researched as carefully as possible. We think that's much, much scarier than, you know, someone jumping out or chasing you or something like that. So when we're developing these stories, historical accuracy always becomes number one. Because if we don't have credibility, people are not going to believe anything we say about the ghost stories. And these are real-life ghost stories we tell. Does that mean the stories are necessarily 100% true? Well, we can't say that for certain because we do depend on eyewitness to be a part of our research. So we do have people who have had these experiences. The stories we put on the tour are the stories we believe to be accurate as represented by the people who experienced them. Which is, it can be a bit of a dicey one, except what we really look for are those stories where there are multiple witnesses, you know, multiple encounters that really, particularly when the folks don't know each other or don't even know of the ghost, like in the Ottawa jail hostel, for example. If they don't know of these things, that's when the credibility starts to go up. We really tell historical ghost stories. So what we're interested in is if there's a historical cause or root for what's happening, the unexplained. So we do really, really focus on the historical details and being very precise and being accurate in what we're saying. And we won't supplement a story with something sensational or something that sounds really cool if, in fact, it is not true.
Right.
And a great example of this is the story we tell about the Fairmont Chateau Laurier. Without giving away too many of the details, I think it's well known that the founder, not the founder, but the chairman of the railroad at the time was on the Titanic when it came back just right before the chateau was to open. Now, there's a very popular urban legend that is in fact propagated by the hotel that the furniture for the hotel was on the Titanic when it sank. And that's an excellent, amazing tie to that story. And if that was true, that would be fantastic. But it's not. To the best of our research and having spoken to you know, the marine experts out east, there's just no historical evidence or proof of that. So we don't tell that because we believe it's not true. So we'll never supplement a story for the sake of entertainment. What's really fun about the tours is that we are teaching people a lot about the different cities we operate in while giving them an excellent night out. Right. And that's something really unique that we offer. We get so many locals on our tours who will say things like, you know, I didn't even realize that this place was here, or that's what this building was used for, or this is the history of our own city. Here in Ottawa, people fail or have never been told about how rough and dangerous Bytown was in the early days. I mean, it was like gangs of New York here in Ottawa, and people don't know this. And so we have great fun in telling people the real stories of these cities And there are some really strange and unusual things that have happened that people can't explain.
Right.
And those are the stories we'd like to talk about on the tour.
So in finding out this historical accuracy, like what is your methodology? Is it sort of using, I know you mentioned that you like to talk to people. Is it newspapers? Do you do any archival research? Or how do you find these stories?
I would say the archival research is definitely where we start with any particular building or event that we're looking at. Without the historical perspective, we cannot be informed on how to tell the story because we believe the history of these places cannot be separated from their ghost stories.
Right.
So we do a lot of archival research, spent many, many, many days in the archives looking for, it's not even so much for big stories, but little pieces of information that sometimes we find and sometimes there are these unanswered questions. So we spend the time, we go through the archives, newspapers, books. There's quite a few great books have come out in the past few years about early Ottawa, for example. Really well done, really well researched, and things like that can be a great resource. So we combine, I guess, the more traditional academic methods of research, along with interviewing the people who have had the experience,
right,
or experiences, or the different people involved, and combined with, we often do our own investigations.
Okay.
We'll send folks out to chat with people, but also to investigate the area, and we'll look for probable causes. It is kind of funny that most of our staff here are quite skeptical,
right.
And if someone tells us a ghost story, our first response is not usually, "That's a fantastic story." Usually, the first response is, "Well, is there a plausible explanation for that?"
Right.
Because we're really only interested in those stories that are difficult to explain, and those are the ones that really fascinate us.
And it's interesting, too, because like I know when I did the tour, I think every stop along the way the guide was saying, and we've heard from multiple people, like this was verified by this, like on the tour itself, it seems as though stressing that these aren't invented stories is an important part of, giving people that chill and having people really relate to the stories and sort of believe them. And it's a part that I really enjoyed. Now, you talked, too, about, how locals go on these tours and talk about how there's stuff they didn't know. And I know myself, one of the reasons, again, why I was skeptical was that, like, I live in Centertown. I live, 2 blocks south of Lisgar Collegiate, and I used to see the tours over by Lisgar Collegiate. I'm like, you're in my neighborhood. I mean, but then, again, I went on the tour, and it sort of changed my whole perspective. But how much of a balance is it for you, trying to show off the city? Because, you have a lot of tourists there who are here to see the city and this, versus the accuracy of the ghost stories. Like, is there an emphasis on stories that maybe take place at more prominent locations, or are you just looking for the best possible stories?
The simple answer, we are looking for the best possible stories we believe to be true. And that's what will follow our lead. I mean, you're absolutely right. There are some very practical considerations when, designing a tour route, for example. There are some areas, we may not wish to take a group of 30 locals or visitors of the city through in the evening for safety reasons or just aesthetic reasons.
Right.
There are certain spots that are beautiful here, areas in the market, Spark Street where we start. We do like to highlight those on the walking route. But as for the stories themselves, we'll always tell the best stories.
Right.
And the best stories are usually the ones where we can be inside the building, like at the jail where we can tell the stories, or we're able to outside the building and see the exterior and see the larger environment and consider, what's happened at these different places.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite spots was under the bridge, the Laurier Bridge by the canal there.
The Sappers Bridge?
Yeah. Which was, I thought that was really nice because there's a spot that a lot of people are going to go anyway, see the canal, and where the guide stopped, and I don't know how much leeway they have in where they stopped to tell the story, but he was kind of in the shadows when he was telling the story, and it was great. It was so creepy the way he was talking. So the story was great, the location was great, and that was sort of my favorite part. And that's when I sort of was sold on the whole concept. It was in that moment. But is there any sort of priority on the tourists themselves? Like, if I'm a tourist, you would think that I want to see the Chateau Laurier here, or even maybe the Parliament buildings if there's a story there. Is there that priority to cater to that market at all? It's
interesting that our breakdown of customers over the year is roughly 50-50 between, which is fabulous. We have so many folks here in the community that support us, bring their friends and family. Whenever they have someone visit, they bring friends along, and we are so grateful for those folks, and they come to all our special events. And the other half, of course, are tourists. So we are proud of our city, and we want to display it in the best light possible. but the priority, as we said, is always about the ghost stories. And Parliament Hill is a great example. We have a few kind of very flimsy ghost stories about Parliament Hill, but we do not feel we have any stories that are credible enough, have enough historical background, enough research, successful research that has been done that justify putting it on the tour. So we do not go to Parliament Hill on any of our ghost tours. So we'll never pick spots like that. It really is just providing the best tour experience,
Right.
whether locals or visitors. So what do folks want? Where are folks going to feel safe? Where will they have fun? What are the buildings they want to hear stories about? Is a consideration. Chateau Laurier is a great example. I mean, it's a very impressive looking building, and it also has this great history. And because it has such a great history, that lends itself so well to ghost stories. Number of people who've passed through, the historical importance of that building to the city, and the things that went on there. That's what makes it really interesting. So there's never a deliberate attempt to pander to locals or tourists. We just want to give the best tour possible, and that's really how we try to balance it out.
Right, so you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself just a tourist business then?
Not at all.
No.
As I said, we have about 20,000 locals who come on the tour per year. Of those, several thousand of them are student groups who come. As I said, a lot of our director in the company, Glenn Shackleton, is himself a history graduate, and a lot of our staff are historians themselves. So there's a lot of pride we take in telling, giving the real story, the behind-the-scenes story, but a very accurate depiction, no sensationalization or anything like that.
Right. And the one thing that I've noticed, and I've heard, I don't know if I could say I've even heard the whole story, but walking down Spark Street, and I don't know which tour it's on, but they talk about Darcy McGee. So in just walking past, I've heard snippets of the story, and I think that's a good example of the parts that I've heard. That's a story that would be easy to sensationalize. But the way it's been presented, and again, when I'm walking down the street, it seems as though it's very real, and sort of telling who he is, and then why he got shot, and explaining that, we don't really know why he got shot, but it happened here, and here's the pub, and...
Yeah, exactly. It's such a great example because so many people who live in this city today have no idea that we had a political assassination steps from Parliament Hill.
Right, yeah.
And it is an incredible story. And you're right. Through our tours, so many more people know about Darcy McGee and about Patrick Whalen, who may be our ghost that inhabits the jail now, but just a little bit, too, about how justice worked at that time.
Right.
And, the idea of Sir John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister of the time, sitting right beside the judge who was presiding over the trial, which... as a close friend of Darcy McGee, that's so corrupt.
Yeah.
That is absolutely corrupt and totally improper. But that's how things worked at the time, and I think it's a great illustration how things have changed, particularly in the city, but also in Canada in general, with things like capital punishment as well, with the tours we do through the jail. It's just such an eye-opening experience to learn how things used to work.
And I know, in my experience, there's a couple things, and again, we don't want to give too much away, but there's a couple things I learned about the city that I didn't know, sort of what was around Spark Street and sort of the explanation of the area itself and what it used to be, which I thought was just really amazing. And so I came away from it, knowing more about, the area in which, I walk by the War Memorial every day, and I walk up Spark Street every day, and now I know more about this area, and I was really pleased with the balance that was there between the ghost tour and then the explaining of the city and the history of the city.
It is a very interesting balance because we are not historical. We are a historical company, but the focus of the ghost tours is this combination of history and ghost stories.
Right.
And there is a delicate balance because you do get people who don't care at all about history and just want to be scared and have the thrill.
Yeah.
And then you have those other folks who are really, really interested in history but don't pay much mind to the ghost stories.
Right.
So that's the line we always try to walk. What we say is we tell real-life ghost stories and leave it up for the audience to try to interpret what this all means. We're not saying, ghosts are real. We're not saying, everything we're saying is the absolute be-all and end-all. We're saying these are some really interesting things that have happened in these really interesting places.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to convey to folks.
Now, with Halloween coming up, obviously this is the busy season for you. Does the mindset change at all with Halloween? Because this is the time of year where more people maybe want that scare experience. Yep. Does the experience on the tour change with that? Whereas maybe in the spring it'd be a different sort of a balance? How do you reconcile this desire of people at this specific time of year that they really want to be scared?
It does change, but not by a great degree. For example, our tour through the jail, or ghost tour, which is called Ghosts on the Gallows, during Halloween that becomes the Are You Afraid of the Dark tour. So we do the tour through the jail virtually in the dark to add a little bit more of fear into it. So we are aware that people like that, so we do try to add a bit more in. And we're doing a brand new tour this year, which is an interesting tie-in here as well, which is our Incident at the Bunker, a zombie adventure, which is the first tour we're doing that is not based on fact at all in any way. And we're not pretending it is. I mean, it's about time traveling back to the day the Deepin Bunker closed in 1994 and reliving the top secret military experiment that's been covered up, which led to zombies. But even in that case, where we are a completely fictional story about a zombie takeover of the bunker, which is going to be absolutely terrifying, we're still able, through this medium of entertainment, to teach a lot to folks about the Deepin Bunker itself.
Right.
A lot of folks have never been out there, and it's such an amazing place. And we're going to be able to talk, the very basics about the building, how it was used, the different structural things. So even though we'll be doing this adventure, which is completely made up, folks are still going to take away a lot of hard and real information about that building, and hopefully it will increase their desire to learn more about the history, more about the Cold War. Particularly for those of us who are young enough that we didn't really get to experience it firsthand, what it was like in the 50s and the 60s. And that's a great joy we take in this job, being able to do that.
So there's Haunted Walks Ottawa, Haunted Walks Kingston.
That's right.
Haunted Walks Toronto.
That's right.
And those are the three, and it's hauntedwalks.com.
Hauntedwalk.com.
Haunted Walk.
Haunted Walk.
Singular, sorry.
Singular.
Yeah.
We are the Haunted Walk. Hauntedwalk.com is the best place to go for information. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, things like that. And we're always interested on the research side, historical side. If people have had strange things happening to them, or they know of great ghost stories, we'd love to get those emails. Doesn't mean it's going to lead to a story on the tour, but you never know when one little piece of information we might get may set us down the road to discover something really fascinating and really interesting. So we're always open to that as well, and all the information for that is on the website as well.
Terrific. Well, thanks for doing this, Jim. And
my pleasure.
Now we will shift our focus, and we'll talk to a tour guide and get the experience of what it's actually like to go on one of these walks. And with that, we welcome in tour guide to the stars, Denis Lamoureux. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Now, I have mentioned the first half with Jim, I did mention going on the tour, and you were my tour guide.
Yes, I was.
And I was really intrigued on the tour and how you did it because, well, one, I know you, and so I've known you for a couple of years now, and sort of I know your style and who you are, and I thought it was really interesting in that you took your historical background, because you do have a history background.
Yes, that's correct.
And you were more theatrical than I'd ever seen you, and I mean this in a very positive way. And I was very entertained on the tour, but as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I also learned a lot about the city and specifically like my neighborhood.
Yes.
And so it was really interesting for me, and that's sort of what I took away from the tour. But I'm wondering, as a tour guide, when you go out on a tour with people, whether they're tourists or whether they're locals, what is your goal as the tour guide? What do you want these people to take away with them when they leave your tour?
That's a great question. The way that I give a tour is I want people to leave with a different perspective on the city, because with the original Haunted Walk, we're going down the downtown area, we're going near the Chateau Laurier, we're going near the City Hall buildings, and then we finish up near the Rideau Canal. So I'm trying to give them a little bit of a different perspective, a little more of a spooky, if you will, perspective on the city, and that when next time they walk around the Chateau Laurier, they'll be like, there's a difference. There's more than one story to that building. Mm-hmm. So no, definitely my goal is just to give them a different perspective and also to share information. As you said, a lot of people from Ottawa, they don't know the full story here about Ottawa. So as we walk along, I'm able to give information. This building dates from when, a little bit, who has lived there before, and what was the former uses of the building. So definitely it gives people a different perspective on it.
I absolutely took a different perspective on the city after doing it, but especially in a city like Ottawa, where each building has so much historical significance, and the tour that you'd give, like you say, it goes down by the Rideau Canal. It goes down under where the Bytown Museum is.
Yes.
And also over by Old City Hall and these buildings. So as the tour guide, how conscious are you of the historical significance of these buildings?
Oh, I'm fully aware of it because as the way that the stories are scripted, usually we start off with a little bit of a general history of the building. So I definitely, I know the historical background, behind the Château Laurier, beginning of the 20th century with the Grand Trunk Railway Company of Canada. So I think in order to better share your story, by knowing the history behind it, you can make a better link between the ghost story and its use and its former use. So definitely, I and especially with my historical background, I'm being, a student at the University of Ottawa in history. I probably make a stronger link between the two just because that's my area of interest.
For sure. And do you consider what you do at the Haunted Walks a history tour, or do you consider it a ghost tour?
It's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, yes. Because you're giving history of the building of the city, and then you're adding a little twist to it.
Sure.
Maybe some lesser known stories. So we go by the Château Laurier. I know I bring this. This is one of my favorite stories. Going by the Château Laurier, give a little bit of story about Charles Melville Hayes and a few experiences that have been had there. So no, definitely the historical background plays a major role. Yes.
In that way, then, that because there is this history emphasis, both obviously from the company itself and then for you as the guide, how would you deal with a customer or customers or a group who say, because I'm assuming everyone on the tour has a different reason for being there.
Yes.
Right? Some
absolutely.
people probably want or maybe think or expect that it's a history tour, like a pure, just 100% history. We're going to these locations. We're going to talk about what's happened in each spot.
Yes.
Other people might think of it as more of a paranormal experience. They're just there to be scared, and we think there's ghosts here, and maybe like, and that's what they want. So how do you deal with customers who have different priorities? When
it comes to the storytelling itself, I tell the same story on each occasion, or I don't doubt very much the story itself. However, it's between the spots because we do walk around the downtown area. So after I'm done telling the story at the Château Laurier, and before we get to our next stop, I can adapt my tour to the group itself. Some, when we're having our discussions, they'll ask me questions. Oh, do you know a little more about the history of the Château Laurier? Or else, in other cases, some people ask me, "Oh, have you had paranormal experiences during your tours, or do you know of other paranormal experience that have been had here?" So definitely, it's for me, it's when we walk from spot to spot where I can adapt my tour, and I love getting questions, and I do my absolute best to answer them. So in that measure, I'm able to adapt for the group that I'm giving a tour to.
And how much would you say that you've learned about the city and these buildings just in the process?
So much. I definitely have a different view on some of the buildings now where we walk along. Before, you didn't even really know they existed, and now when you're walking down Elgin, for example, you're like, oh, that building, you know a little more history about it, and you're also a little more curious about it, and maybe you want to even dig a little deeper and see if there are other stories, or learn more about about the individuals behind the building of the construction of the building. So it makes you want to dig a little deeper. And I believe when you came on one of my tours, you got to learn some new things that you didn't know about Ottawa. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that was really interesting for me, and I think I mentioned this to Jim as well, is that you guys go over to Lisgar Collegiate, which is a high school downtown right by City Hall, and I live 4 blocks south of the school, and I never thought that would be a place where you would go on a tour. And it's my neighborhood. Why would I take a tour of my neighborhood?
Absolutely.
But then we do it, and we stop at the school, and you sort of explain the school and what it used to be, and all this stuff. And it really did give me a different perspective on things, and made me, I don't want to say it made me appreciate the city more, because I like the city, and I've always liked it, but it changed my mindset a little bit. Not only about the tour itself, because I was skeptical going in as to what it actually was, but also about sort of where I live and how I go when I go about my business as I walk by these places. It adds something to it.
And it's wonderful for tourists. You know, they get to walk around a good section of the downtown area, whether it's near Spark Street, going down by City Hall, going along the Rideau Canal. Yeah. And we do it again in the evening. So it's, it's a nice walk with the sunset or just the beginning of darkness. And again, they get a different perspective and they get to learn. Some folks, they tell me, I'm only here for a day. And well, this is it's a nice opportunity within 90 minutes to get to know a little bit more of the city and a few more of the buildings that are around, and maybe some are lesser known. So yeah, it gives a different view. I think it's wonderful.
Because like other tours, you can go on like those hop on hop off bus tour things, and they take you to those the primary spots and
along Confederation Boulevard.
Yeah, yes. And so this gives you a different perspective on some of the main stuff that those places are going to show you, but it also takes you to different places and shows that the city goes a little bit beyond the Parliament buildings and the Chateau Laurier and Spark Street.
Probably the biggest secret, if you will, is the Bytown Museum.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, so many people don't know about it, but it is one of the more haunted places. Is on our tour, and for the Halloween season, we'll be actually going inside, which has started already. Yeah. We go inside, and some of my colleagues have had experiences there. So,
well, that place, even before I did the tour, and they talk about that on the tour, but it's just a creepy looking building anyway. It could be 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon in July, and it's a creepy looking building. I have to say, I'm glad we did not go inside when I was doing this tour. That would have been a bit much for me, I think.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to. We're starting our Halloween tours now, and I'm looking forward to giving tours inside the Bytown.
Now, given that we're in the Halloween season, and more people are probably showing up, maybe with an expectation that they're going to be scared, versus say in May when maybe there's more people who want the history side of it. How much would you say, on the whole, as a tour guide, you are giving a performance and are actively trying to scare people? I'm
definitely trying to entertain and I'm sharing a story. So yeah, definitely you're being expressive. There's a little bit of theater involved, but you don't want to be over dramatic where you actually you lose credibility. People are trying, as it is Halloween season, people are, hoping to get maybe a little spooked out more. Sure. But going to the Bytown Museum where things are going to be a little dim, the lights are dimmed, and the stories we're about to tell will ensure that they'll have a great experience. Yeah. And, the stories speak for themselves. They're great stories, and just I try to give a balanced performance, though, if you will, in order not to lose credibility. Because again, you can easily be over dramatic, and then people find it funnier than actual. Then people won't take it seriously. Yeah.
And it's interesting too in that I noticed, and maybe it was just me injecting that something that wasn't actually there, but I noticed because when I did the tour with you, it was July, I think.
Yeah, it was the end of July.
Yeah,
yes.
And it was when it was one of those days where it was 200 degrees outside. It was ridiculously hot. But because it was that time of year, when we started the tour, it was light. Mm-hmm. And we ended in darkness.
Yes.
But I noticed as we went, it seemed as though you were being more active in telling the stories. You were trying to be maybe a little, I'll use creepier for lack of a better word, as we went along and as it got darker. As a guide, are you conscious of this? Like when there's still light or when it's still sunset, that maybe you're going to be a little, maybe not as theatrical, whereas at night, given that you're wearing the cape and you got the little lantern and everything, that the darkness sort of lends itself to trying to scare people.
When it's darker, it is, I guess, easier to get that spooky feeling. So when we're going to be going in the Bytown Museum during the Halloween season, things are darker. It's easier to get that spooky ambiance than when it's, still very light outside. Though, when I'm giving a tour, I just try to give the best performance, the best performance that I absolutely can, and you feed off the crowd as well.
Right.
When you get a crowd that is really into it and they're listening to every word, and you can see their facial expressions, and then you feed off of that energy. Yeah. That's why the Chateau Laurier story is one of my favorite ones to tell, and I love to see the reactions of the guests on our tour, because when you see those facial expressions and they're getting creeped out and scared out, definitely plays a role. Yeah. But But with definitely when it's darker, you can get more of that little bit of a spookier feeling to it. And also with our lanterns, when you're walking along the Rideau Canal and you have your lantern and it's dark outside, it definitely adds to the ambiance. Though, of course, some people aren't there as much for the spook factor. Some people are more just, people are there to learn just, in general about, creepy stories. So really, it varies. Everyone has a different, everyone comes for a different reason on the tour.
Sure. And, well, have you made like any 5-year-old kids cry?
I haven't made any 5-year-olds cry, though I do have some colleagues who have scared, have given a really good scare to the younger ones. Yes, absolutely.
That's part of the reason why you're there.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Now, you've mentioned the Chateau Laurier story a couple times. Now, would you consider that one your favorite?
Definitely one of my favorites to tell. And, would you like for me to? Absolutely. Yeah. There are a few stories with the Chateau Laurier, but I will tell one about a tour director, and that's not only because I do
self promotion.
I do. Exactly. I also do some work as a city tour guide. But, so there was a tour guide who came and he stayed at the chateau. And one night he and the bus driver, they had spent a late evening in Ottawa, and they returned to the hotel through the lobby, wished each other good night. And afterwards, the tour director decided to take the stairwell instead of the elevator. And as he opened the door to the stairwell, he heard a rich baritone voice singing an old-fashioned song. And he felt uneasy about it, but he decided to continue up. And as he went up the stairs, the sound grew louder and louder until he was sure that at the next landing, he was finally going to meet this individual. But when he turned the corner, no one was there, and the singing had stopped. And then he checked in the window down the 5th floor hallway, and no one was there. And then he didn't hear any footsteps on the marble floor, and he didn't hear any doors open or close. But just to make sure, he ran up to the 6th and final floor, and again, no one was there. And after he left the hotel, he was notified by management that he wasn't the first person to have such an experience in that stairwell. There was a South American tourist who was at the chateau, and he had the same experience in that same stairwell. So definitely, that's definitely one of my favorite stories to tell, and just to see the facial reactions on the individuals when I'm telling it is definitely. And
that's
definitely
one of the first ones, right? On that.
It's one of the first stops on the tour after we leave 46.5 Spark Street. Yeah. So definitely.
Well, it's good that's like one of the early ones. Then is your favorite because that sort of can get you going and get.
Absolutely. No, it really gets you. And then when you're feeding off the crowd, right? The energy plays such a big role. So you're feeding off of that, and it really gets you pumped up for a great tour.
Yeah. Well, you can even tell as you're telling that you sort of. Just in your expression, even the way you were speaking, you can see that you sort of switched. You're the tour guide now. It's sort of, and you so that there is that performance aspect to it.
Absolutely, yes.
And you've mentioned to me that some of the guides, like there's a mix that there's between people with historical backgrounds, people who are maybe theater backgrounds, actors. So there is sort of the element of that you need both components.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everyone. You can go on many different tours with us, and we all say the same story, but everyone brings their own thing to the story, in their performance.
Which is like any tour you go
absolutely,
on. The guide
yes.
sort of the guide brings a lot of their own personal or personality to the tour, and that
absolutely.
Really affects not. I don't mean it in a bad way, but that can affect how the tour is perceived by the audience.
Oh, absolutely. And we have, some of our guides have more of a theater background, so they'll give a bit of it's a different performance. Some other have a more of an academic background, and I believe I come from as I'm an MA student, I come from a little more of that background, and I must say, I do like to add in these little tidbits of, I love dates, and so I definitely like to add in these dates and just add a little extra history if I can. And then you have those that are more of column A, column B. There, it's a mix of theater and history. So everyone brings their own personality, as you said. Everyone brings their own personality, and it makes it for a great performance each time. So you can definitely go on the same original haunted walk or the same ghost and gallows, and have a bit of a different experience each time, and definitely enjoy the stories that are told.
For sure. And I've had the chance to meet a couple of the guides, and you can tell that all of them who were there, they want to sort of put on a bit of a show. Like they want to engage people, and like you have to be very outgoing. I think especially for that tour, because you're walking down the street and you as the guide are very conspicuous as you walk down the street. You're not blending in with anybody.
No, not at all.
So I think you have to do that job. You have to be a very outgoing individual.
I say hi to everyone when I'm walking around with my group. I say hi to individuals because they look at you and then good evening, how are you? And then every now and then they're like, oh, how we get more information. Then you you can send them along to the website or else to 46.5 Spark Street. And I have a great time doing it. Everyone recognizes that we've been doing this for a very long time, and everyone recognizes along the route. So it's great. No, I absolutely love it.
All right, now that's so the Halloween season now. Halloween season will have started by the time we post this.
Yes, that's correct.
And so what's different about the Halloween season?
Halloween season, well, we're offering the Diefenbunker a Diefenbunker tour. It's a zombie-themed tour, which will be going on the weekends of the 20th. It's going to be on Saturday the 20th, the 27th, and November 3rd. And then also we have the Ghost and Gallows Halloween version inside the Old County Jail. And we also have the original Haunted Walk, which is going to take place in the Bytown for a Halloween edition.
Yeah, there's zero chance I'm doing that. I am not going in that building.
No, I'm looking for it. Actually, I'm going to be giving one at the end of the week, and looking forward to it. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Yeah, let's just see a ghost, and then you got to run out with 20 people who are on the tour.
I know, and I've had colleagues who have had experiences in the Bytown, so hopefully I'll be having one of my own, so I'll be able to share next year. If we'll do a podcast, and I'll share my my story.
You'll be part. It'll be like your initiation into being like one of the next level of the tour guide, someone who has their own
story,
their own story to bring to it.
But I do have a story to share with you.
Sure.
Everyone on our tours always ask, "Oh, what kind of experiences have you had?" And the experience that I've had, I was giving a tour of the original Haunted Walk, where we're going along the route, and this lady was taking pictures along the way. And I told my Chateau Laurier story. I guess she took some pictures. Then we got to our next location. And when she was taking pictures, there was an orb beside me in the pictures. And then she wiped off the lens and continued taking pictures. And the orb was still there. But then we continued on to the next stop afterwards. And the orb wasn't there anymore. Again, I have no explanation for it, but that's the experience I've had with my tours. Yeah, so
that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
So it's like you're rookie hazing a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. No, definitely.
So we'll give the website again. It's hauntedwalk.com.
That's correct.
If you're coming to the Ottawa one, ask for Denis. Of course.
All my colleagues are great.
Of course, yes. And it's important to note they're offered in both French and English.
Absolutely, yes.
Yep. So it's hauntedwalk.com in Ottawa, Kingston, Toronto.
Yep.
With the same company, so you get the same great experience in all those places.
Absolutely.
Terrific. And so thank you, Denis, for coming down.
Thank you so much,
and
Sean.
Our thanks as well to Jim Dean for doing the first half of the podcast. If you want to get in touch with me for the podcast, if you have ideas or anything, historyslam@gmail.com. You can find me there. You can also find me on Twitter at Dr. Shawnee Fever, and you can follow all my fun and frivolity on Twitter.
Absolutely.
It's good times.
Indeed.
Yeah, so everybody, thanks for listening, and if you're out and you see Enrico Palazzo, please say hi for me.
Thanks for listening to the History Slam podcast. Check out ActiveHistory.ca for more features and articles, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes.